At a busy international airport, a shocking incident was caught on camera. An elderly man, dressed modestly and sitting quietly near the terminal, was suddenly kicked and shouted at by a security officer. Dozens of passengers watched, but none stepped in. To everyone there, he looked like no one important. But what they didn't know was that this man wasn't just anybody. And what happened next left the entire airport frozen in disbelief. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more powerful, emotional stories with unforgettable twists. Your support helps us share more lessons that matter. Now let's find out who this old man really was, and why that security officer will never forget him. The cold gleam of polished floors reflected the busy pace of passengers at Raymond International Airport. It was one of the largest airports in the region, known for its cutting-edge design and constant flow of travelers from every corner of the globe. Bright yellow signs pointed to terminals, gates, and lounges. Automated announcements reminded passengers to keep an eye on their belongings. The smell of roasted coffee drifted from a nearby cafe, blending with the scent of duty-free perfume. At the far end of Terminal A, near the wall beneath the sign reading A2 Departure to Gate 60, sat an elderly man. His clothes were clean but aged. A thick brown coat wrapped tightly around his shoulders, and a worn-out flat cap covered his head. His silver beard was well kept, and beside him sat a modest black travel bag that had clearly seen better days. He wasn't begging. He wasn't disturbing anyone. He was simply sitting, eyes focused forward, as if waiting for something. Or someone. To passing eyes, he looked out of place. This terminal was usually reserved for business-class flyers, VIPs, and priority passengers. The elderly man, with his calm posture and quiet presence, didn't fit the high-rolling atmosphere that buzzed around him. Officer Kellen had just finished his second patrol round of the day. Known among his colleagues for his rigid discipline and low tolerance for rule breakers, Kellen was not someone to cross. He took pride in his uniform and took even greater pride in enforcing airport policies to the letter. As he turned the corner and spotted the man sitting by the wall, his brows furrowed. "Not again," he muttered under his breath. He approached with heavy, deliberate steps, his boots thudding against the smooth floor. A few travelers paused, sensing tension. Some pulled out their phones. Others simply watched with faint interest, unaware of what was about to unfold. "Hey, old man," Kellen said, standing tall above him. "This isn't a waiting room for the homeless. Move along." The old man slowly turned his gaze toward the officer. His eyes were sharp, piercing even, but he said nothing. Kellen frowned. "You deaf?" "I said move." Still, the man did not answer. Instead, he shifted slightly, reaching for the handle of his bag as though he intended to get up at his own pace. But that wasn't fast enough for Kellen. In one swift motion, the officer's boot knocked the bag aside with a loud thud. The man blinked but didn't react. That only irritated Kellen more. "Move now," he barked. And then, in a sudden, unprovoked outburst, Kellen lifted his foot and slammed it into the old man's chest. The man gasped as he fell backward, hitting the floor hard. Gasps echoed across the terminal. A woman screamed. A few passengers stopped in their tracks, horrified. Others recorded the moment in stunned silence. The old man lay there, one hand gripping his chest, the other reaching out slightly toward the bag that had been kicked away. Kellen stood over him, breathing heavily, jaw clenched. For a few seconds he felt powerful. But that feeling wouldn't last long. Because someone had seen everything. Someone who would soon turn the entire situation upside down. Terminal A was in an unusual state. Conversations turned into murmurs. Eyes darted between the man on the ground and the officer still standing over him. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was thick with discomfort. Kellen took a step back, his boots scraping the tile floor. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain. A few people kept recording, though most didn't dare intervene. Airports were known for being strict places. But this felt different. Too far. The old man slowly sat up, wincing as he leaned on his elbow. He did not scream. He did not retaliate. His hand reached for his coat, which had shifted during the fall. Beneath the folds, a faded name tag dangled from a cord around his neck. The letters were old and weathered, barely legible. But he tucked it back in before anyone could notice. Outside, a sleek black luxury car approached the entrance of the terminal. Its glossy paint reflected the afternoon sky. The vehicle didn't belong to a taxi fleet or ride-sharing service. It had no logo, no commercial plates, just clean, silent authority. From the driver's side, a sharply dressed young man stepped out. His suit was tailored, his shoes spotless, his expression unreadable. As he opened the rear door, a second man stepped out, a few years older, carrying a small black briefcase. Their steps were coordinated, practiced. They walked as if they owned the floor beneath them. They didn't head toward the ticketing counters. They didn't look for baggage. They walked straight toward Gate A2, toward the crowd, and toward the commotion now stirring across the terminal. Inside, Kellen was trying to salvage control of the situation. "All right, folks. Disperse. Nothing to see here," he barked, waving people away. "The matter is under control." But it wasn't. The elderly man remained seated, now propped against the wall with his arms crossed. There was a quiet dignity to him even after what had happened. He observed the crowd not with fear but as if he'd seen it all before. His gaze wandered briefly to the cameras overhead, then to the flight information screens blinking above him. The sound of dress shoes echoed louder than boots as the two men from the car entered the terminal. Passengers turned. Heads followed their movement. Their presence carried weight. And as they approached the scene, the younger man narrowed his eyes directly at Kellen. "You," he said, voice calm but stern. "Step away from him." Kellen blinked. "Who the hell are you?" The young man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his head slightly and addressed the old man on the ground. "Grandfather," he said gently, "are you hurt?" The word cut through the air like thunder. Every eye turned toward the old man again. "Grandfather?" Kellen's face lost its color. He looked from the young man to the old one and back again. Something was wrong. Something big. The old man lifted his chin, eyes locking with Kellen's. And then the young man stepped forward, pulling a sleek wallet from his breast pocket. He held it up for Kellen to see. Inside was an identification badge, silver-lined, with an engraved emblem of an eagle wrapped around the letters ARMA. Raymond Mubarak International Airport. Founder-level access. And under it, a name that made Kellen's knees falter. The terminal, once buzzing with footsteps and idle chatter, had now fallen into an unnatural silence. Even the automated announcements seemed to have paused, as if the entire airport was holding its breath. Kellen stared at the badge in disbelief. His lips moved but no words came out. The man standing before him, with a composure far beyond his years, returned the badge to his coat and stepped aside. Now all eyes returned to the old man still seated on the floor. He adjusted his coat slowly, then reached into the inside pocket and pulled out his faded name tag once more. This time he didn't tuck it away. He held it up. And for those close enough to read, the name printed on it sent a chill down their spines. Yusuf S. Mubarak. Suddenly, everything made sense. The name engraved at the main gate, the initials RMIA that had become so familiar they were taken for granted. Yusuf S. Mubarak wasn't just any elder traveler. He was the founder. The man who once stood with dignitaries as the first stone of the airport was laid. The man who invested his life savings into turning a neglected airfield into a hub of international prestige. The man who, years ago, had stepped away from the spotlight and handed control to his only grandson. The very man now standing before Kellen in an immaculate suit. The young man's voice came again. Calm, clear, but heavy with finality. "You assaulted the founder of this airport. The man without whom this job of yours, this entire building, wouldn't even exist." Kellen's face turned a deep shade of red. He stumbled back a step, eyes wide. I didn't know. He looked like. Like what?" the grandson interrupted. "Like someone unimportant?" Kellen opened his mouth again, but silence won. The eyes of the crowd were no longer curious. They were condemning. Phones were still recording. What had been a spectacle was now a scandal. The old man finally stood. There was strength in his movement now, steady and proud. Despite the fall and the humiliation, his posture was unshaken. He brushed off his coat, stepped forward, and faced Kellen directly. "You judged me because I didn't wear a tie. Because I sat on the floor. Because I wasn't loud or young or polished," he said softly, yet each word struck like thunder. "But what you truly did was show the world what kind of man you are." He turned slightly toward his grandson. "Let's go. I've seen enough." The young man nodded and gently placed a hand on his grandfather's back, guiding him toward the executive entrance behind the glass doors, an area most staff didn't even know existed. As they walked away, airport security arrived. Not Kellen's peers, but men in dark suits and earpieces, answering not to the airport manager, but to the board itself. "Officer Kellen," One of them said firmly. You're to surrender your badge. Effective immediately. He hesitated. But when he saw the glint of the founder's name still swinging from the old cord, he knew there was no point resisting. He removed the badge from his uniform and handed it over. And just like that, the man who moments ago held power over another's dignity was left with nothing but the weight of his own shame. But this wasn't over. Back inside the executive lounge, far from the stares and whispers of the main terminal, the atmosphere was quiet and warm. A marble fountain trickled softly in the center of the room, and rich wooden panels lined the walls. Everything here was crafted with care. It was a world separated from the chaos just beyond its glass doors. Yusuf S. Mubarak sat calmly on a leather armchair, a warm towel draped across his shoulders. An attendant knelt to check his wrist, making sure the fall hadn't done lasting damage. But Yusuf waved him off gently. I've taken worse beatings in life than that kick, he said with a soft chuckle. This one was just louder. His grandson, Farhan, stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes still cold from what he'd just witnessed. You shouldn't have done it alone, he said. We could have arranged cameras, private observers. Yusuf raised a hand. Then it would have become a performance. I needed to see how the system breathes when no one is watching. Farhan shook his head. You call that breathing? I call it exposing, Yusuf replied. Exposing the cracks in what we've built. The test had begun days earlier. Yusuf, frustrated by the reports of rising discrimination within the airport, especially toward the elderly and those who didn't dress to impress, had made a decision. No board meetings. No public warnings. Just a personal test. He would go in as a nobody. No suits. No entourage. Just an old man with a story sitting where everyone could see but no one would care. And what he witnessed confirmed what he feared. Farhan, he said softly, when the people working under your name believe power gives them the right to humiliate others, you have failed as a leader. We have failed. Farhan's fists clenched. He will be blacklisted from all major airports in our group. I'll make sure the footage is released to training departments across the region. This won't be buried. Yusuf didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked toward the glass doors leading back into the terminal. Don't just punish him, he said. Use this. Build something from it. Farhan turned toward his grandfather, confused. Yusuf continued. The true power of a name is not how many people it controls, but how many it protects. If my name is going to sit on that wall out there, then it must mean something. Not just for the rich. For everyone. Farhan's eyes slowly softened. The weight of his grandfather's words sank deep. Outside the airport was abuzz. News had begun to spread. Clips of the incident were already being shared. Comment sections exploded with opinions. Some condemned. Some defended. But all were talking. And far away in a quiet break room, Kellen sat alone. His uniform shirt hung on a chair beside him, his badge already gone. The security camera footage had already been reviewed. His actions were clear. And as he watched the video one last time on his own phone, watching himself shove, yell, and kick, he no longer saw authority. He saw failure. Failure to recognize dignity. Failure to control pride. Failure to simply ask instead of assume. But the twist hadn't ended. Because just when he thought the worst was behind him, a final message arrived on his phone. One he never expected. It was from the airport director's office. An invitation. You are requested to appear at the boardroom, Level 5 East Wing, 3 p.m. sharp. Do not be late. It didn't make sense. He had been stripped of his badge, publicly humiliated, and filmed in an act of disgrace that now circulated online. He had expected a termination letter, maybe even legal consequences. But this? A summons from the top floor? The boardroom on Level 5 wasn't for people like him. It was where deals worth millions were signed. Where suits discussed expansion plans and global partnerships. No security officer had ever set foot there, unless they were delivering coffee or escorting guests. But something in the tone of that message, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was a call. With shaking hands, Kellen changed into a clean shirt. His uniform was no longer his. His steps were hesitant as he made his way through restricted corridors, now feeling more like a trespasser than an employee. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. At each floor he half expected someone to stop him. But no one did. When the doors opened, the East Wing greeted him with silence and sunlight pouring through ceiling-high windows. A young woman in a navy blouse stood waiting. Follow me, she said politely, then turned. Kellen followed. Past reception. Past framed photographs of the airport's history. Past gold-lettered plaques with names of every major investor, each one more powerful than the last. And finally into the boardroom. It was massive. A circular table sat in the center, its surface polished like obsidian. At the far end sat Farhan Mubarak. To his right stood the old man Yusuf, no longer in his dusty coat but in a crisp, formal suit. His presence filled the room with gravity. Kellen stopped just inside the doorway. He felt smaller than ever. Farhan looked up from the file he had been reading. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the empty chair directly across from them. Kellen obeyed, his legs stiff, throat dry. He could hear the subtle hum of the air conditioner, the ticking of a sleek clock on the wall, and his own heartbeat. "You probably think we brought you here to punish you again," Farhan began, his voice calm. Kellen looked down. "Sir, whatever the reason." "I deserve it," Yusuf interjected. "You do." Kellen closed his eyes. The sting of that truth hit harder when spoken without anger. "But punishment alone doesn't rebuild a man," Yusuf added. "What you did was wrong. Deeply wrong. But it wasn't unique. It revealed a larger disease in our system. One that many carry quietly." Kellen looked up, confused. "We want to fix it," Farhan said. "And we believe you, of all people, can help us do that." Kellen blinked. "I don't understand." "You know the mistake. You felt the consequences. And now you understand the cost," Yusuf said. "We're creating a new division. A human training unit. Not for procedures but for compassion. For perspective. For dignity." Farhan nodded. "You'll be on camera. You'll speak to future recruits. You'll tell your story not to hide it, but to ensure it's not repeated." Kellen's voice cracked. "You want me to be the face of the shame I caused?" "No," Yusuf said. "We want you to be the voice of the lesson we need to teach." Kellen sat in stunned silence. The humiliation he'd caused was now becoming the very fire that might change others. Not through revenge, but redemption. And this time the entire world would be watching for the right reason. The airport moved forward as airports always do. Flight schedules remained tight, terminals remained full, and life continued. But behind the scenes something was different. A quiet reform had begun. And it all started with one painful moment, caught on camera, and one unexpected decision by the man who could have demanded vengeance, but chose wisdom instead. Inside a converted training room on the lower floor of the airport, rows of new security recruits sat upright in their chairs. The projector screen in front of them showed a frozen frame, an image of Kellen caught mid-action, standing over the elderly founder just moments after the kick. Then the video played. Gasp. Silence. A few eyes turned away, uncomfortable with the aggression, the cruelty. When the video ended, the lights rose slowly. And there he was, Kellen, standing at the front of the room. Not in his old uniform, but in a simple gray shirt with a new patch on his chest. It read, Human Values Instructor. He took a breath, then spoke. "I am not proud of what you just saw," he began. "But I am here because someone I wronged chose to help me grow instead of burying me." He shared the full story. Every detail. No excuses. No sugarcoating. He talked about how easy it is to get used to power. How simple it becomes to stop seeing people as human beings. And how in one instant, a man can lose his honor not by accident but by the absence of empathy. The recruits listened. Truly listened. Later, Yusuf watched a recording of the session from his private office. His eyes were thoughtful, hands clasped on the desk. Farhan stood nearby, reading the latest report on the program's expansion. The pilot training unit was already being adopted by 2 other major airports. "He's doing well," Farhan said. Yusuf nodded. "Because he's walking with the weight of what he's done, and choosing to carry it forward." A soft knock came at the door. It was Kellen. He stepped in, unsure but with a quiet sense of belonging. Yusuf stood. "I heard your session," he said. "You've come far." Kellen nodded. "Still a long way to go." Yusuf smiled. "The path matters more than the distance." Then, without warning, he held out a freshly pressed uniform jacket. It bore a new emblem stitched over the heart, 2 hands clasped together in respect. "You earned this, not because you were perfect, but because you refused to stay broken." Kellen took it with both hands. For the first time in his life, a uniform felt heavier in meaning than in fabric. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back. "Thank you," he said. Yusuf only smiled. "Make it mean something." Outside, flights continued to depart. Families reunited. Travelers hurried. Life at Raymond Mubarak International Airport surged with its usual energy. But now, within its walls, something had shifted. A legacy had been defended. A mistake had become a movement. And a man once disgraced had become the voice that helped others rise. This story reminds us that power without empathy can easily become abuse. In a fast-paced world where people are judged by their appearance, it is all too easy to forget the core of our shared humanity, respect and equality. A security officer, whose duty was to protect, became the very force of harm simply because he judged someone by their age and appearance. But mistakes are not the end of the story. In fact, from painful missteps can come powerful lessons. When a person finds the courage to acknowledge their wrongdoing, learn from it, and commit to change, they do more than redeem their past. They create a path for greater transformation. The founder in this story did not respond with anger. He did not seek revenge but chose to give a second chance. From this, we learn that kindness, when paired with conviction, can be far more powerful than punishment. A wise decision can turn disgrace into a tool for education, turning the wrongdoer into a carrier of change. We all carry the responsibility to treat others with dignity, regardless of rank, clothing, or age. Because the person who seems ordinary today might be the very one who helped build the world you now stand in. And remember, behind every name engraved on a building, there is often a humble soul, who simply wants to see humanity treated as it should be.